Today's AskReddit post. What is the longest you've gone without knowing a person's name? Oh boy, this is gonna be a good one. Let's get started. My next door neighbor introduced himself when he moved in. I promptly forgot his name. I danced around it for that same 5 years. He was from a French-speaking part of Canada, so when talking with my wife, he was French guy next door. 5 years after first meeting, he admits in a conversation that he'd forgotten my name. We have a good laugh and reintroduce ourselves. His name was Guy. I had it right the whole time. He was French guy next door. French guy next door, not be confused with Venezuelan guy next door. That's a different guy. I moved into my condo in 2011 and I introduced myself to my one neighbor next door to me but instantly forgot his name. We would see each other in passing for years and I would always just say hi in the casual conversation. I met my wife in 2018 from a long distance relationship, and when she finally moved in with me there was the awkward moment when I introduced her to him. I said, "This is my fiance, X, and we're getting married next month." He said, "Congratulations and nice to meet you," then walked away. She asked me what his name was and I said I have no ducking clue. Later that day she said his name is Brad and I was like, "Oh, he looks like a Brad," and she said he had no ducking clue what my name was either, so no big deal. The fact that neither of you knew each other's names for that long and neither of you got caught is just hilarious. My name is apparently Darren to this nice couple who own a restaurant in my town. My name is not Darren. I've known them for 2 years. We're even Facebook friends. They can literally see and read my name. But it's cool. I always wanted to try being a Darren. I like this reply the best. Darren. I've been on the receiving end of this. My nickname in college was the mayor and I had people I had known for years coming up to me at my graduation saying I had no idea your name was actually Dan. 1. Happy cake day. 2. How do you end up with a nickname like mayor? Let me see if I can get my old roommate to answer that. Paging you, man dogja. A whole school year I knew their names, I just didn't know which twin was which and they weren't identical. I have 2 cousins named Matthew and Martin. They are not twins and don't look anything like each other. But I have no idea which one is which. Well, that's easy to fix at least. Just call one of them one name. And if you're wrong, just say that you messed up and meant to say the other name. I've lived in my townhouse for almost 5 years now. And I don't know the name of the guy who lives directly across from me. I have pretty regular interactions with most of my neighbors. But I've never talked with this one guy beyond just exchanging pleasantries while passing each other. When I moved in and first met him, I immediately forgot his name. I was almost positive he said it was Mike. So I went about 4 years just assuming that was probably his name, but not quite confident enough to actually call him Mike. Then a few months ago I was talking to some other neighbors in the parking lot when he walked by, and my other neighbors called out, "Hey, name that is not Mike." So it was confirmed that this guy's name is not, in fact, Mike, and I was relieved I hadn't been calling him that for the past 5 years. But I immediately forgot again what his name actually is. So now all I know is that it is something other than Mike. I'll learn his name by the time I've lived here 10 years. Most likely over a decade. I'm in the UK and I've got to know many a bar acquaintance down my local pub. Over time you get to know about their work, hobbies, likes and dislikes. You get to know how many kids they have, how many times they have been married, etc, etc. Then a friend from out of town visits you, and as you do in the UK, you go to the pub. Lo and behold, your pub acquaintance is there and you introduce your pal from out of town only to realize you know everything about your pub pal. Everything except their bloody name. Illustrate 1649. A whole date. Someone fixed us up but my dude never told me her name. Just the address she wanted me to pick her up. I didn't have guts to ask her name between the date. Edit. She became a long-time GF after that date and we laughed about it forever. Once made it 4-5 dates including staying at her place twice. I just had her saved in my phone as cutie bar X and then avoided saying her name. Finally, the second time at her place, she went to the bathroom and sneaked a peek at her stack of mail to find her name. Work in a pharmacy. A young woman, say late teens early 20s, came up and asked to pick up her grandmother's prescription. I said no problem. What's her name? She looked at me with a blank face, asked me to hold on, and called her family. This one is hilarious. I didn't know my grandfather's actual name until I was 15. It was my name. I was named after him and didn't realize it. I'm a waiter. There are lots of customers who are regulars and I've known them for years. Some of them close to a decade. Very few of them I know their names. Some of them get nicknames amongst the staff. Some favorites are Twix Man, as he would always leave a Twix chocolate bar with a tip. Emma and Stacy, two sisters who used to come in a lot. I know their names but not which one is which. The Vegans, a young couple who were vegan but really cool. I do know their names now, to be fair. My parents. 5 years at least. Same, I thought their name was Mummy and Daddy, legitimately, until I realized other children were calling their mummies and daddies. And so I went to ask my parents what their name was. I remember asking my mom what my middle name is, so I really didn't know my own full name. The guy around the corner I buy weed from has just been the weed guy for 3+ years. A lot of us know weed guy. You know Dave too? Dog park people. We see each other and talk almost every day, but they're always dogs named Mum Dad. I'm sure at some point their name come up, but I just keep forgetting. My dog's groomer does this too. Like I walk in and she yells, my dog's name. Mom is here. Makes sense, she spends way more time with him than she does with me, lol. I work at record store. There's a guy who's been coming in weekly for the entire 11 years I've worked there. We just call him Sweaty Polish Guy. He always pays with cash. A true Eastern European. Dating my girlfriend for a year. Still don't know her name. Premarital name knowledge is a sin. Unexpected Mormon. LOL, they have been dating for a year. Come on, if he was Mormon they would already be married. I once worked with a man for 3 years and didn't learn his name. Best friend I ever had. We still never talk sometimes. Ron, is that you? I have to delete this app. I've said too much. 10 years. The people from my office but from different division. They seem to know me and often call me out when I passed by. But I don't know their names and at this point it seems awkward to ask them. This is the worst. I work in a warehouse with a pretty big sales staff. Maybe 40-50 people. 90% of our interactions are over the phone. So I know a bunch of names but I'm not entirely sure which faces they match up to. My 1 year is quickly approaching. I work in a distribution center for an apparel store. We have probably 15-20 buyers in corporate who I talk to daily. I wouldn't even recognize their face if I passed them in the hall. I have been working for the company for 4 years. The exterminator that came to my parents' house every month to spray had a very long Polish last name. Many consonants, few vowels. People tried to pronounce it, but just couldn't. Instead, they simply referred to him as the Bugman. I thought everyone called the exterminator the Bugman regardless of name. At work we have this old dude who drives shuttles. His name is Ron. I say, hey Ron, every time I see him. 5 years down the road I see Ron standing next to another old dude. Turns out we have 2 shuttle drivers. I've been saying hi Ron to the other guy 50% of the time for 5 years. Does this count? Your brain's facial recognition might not be operating at optimal levels. My entire life I still don't know everyone's name. Hi, I'm Dick. Mr. Nipples to anyone else. Decades. I meet a lot of people thanks to my job and I have a fairly distinct name so folks seem to remember me. Between my weed smoking and poop team memory I kinda gave up. You're seriously the only Rexavision I ever met. A little over 7 years. Really tall redneck that was kind of a dick where I work. It's an analytical laboratory. He brought his samples from one of the production areas. I'm apparently responsible for his nickname. Pig fucker. I called him that big ducker early on. People misheard me and the name stuck. Sorry Tim. You're pig ducking jerk. Same thing happened with one of my dad's friends. His nickname was Tum Tum because he was like 6'4" and 350 pounds, then lost a bunch of weight and is now an MMA fighter. I thought his nickname was Dum Dum. Still don't remember his real name. This was like 5 years ago. Yours. You must not own a dog. I know all the neighborhood dogs' names, but their human counterparts? Nope. It's too late to ask at this point. My first year of uni I had this weed dealer friend. When he introduced himself I thought he said N. I asked him multiple times if he could repeat it and I even said it back to him. So for the first year I called him N. That's how it was in my phone too. Well, at the end of the year I learned that his name was actually Ian, and that I had misheard due to his accent. That's why you ask how do you spell that? Capital N. For more than 20 years with some of my relatives. I don't meet them often, but when I do, they all greet me by my name, even the kids whom I meet for the first time. Imagine having to deal with more than 20 people that know your name and how you relate to them for days on end. I feel that. I'm from a decently large family with a big age gap between me and my cousins who started getting married and having kids when I was about 6. I didn't have anyone to grow up alongside from my family. As the kid of the youngest sibling on both sides who grew up with their siblings old enough to be out of the house, I am estranged on both sides. The bit that always confused me is my parents lived with and cared for the family patriarch for decades, unrecognized, while my aunt went off and has established her own little clan in another city. She literally calls it a clan, to make it nice and clear that there is in people and out people. My father. So obviously like every other kid, I always called dad dad, but I must have been about 6 or 7 when I learned my father's name was Roy. Everyone called him Roy. That was the name on his driver's license. I knew that was his name. When I was around 12, we moved from Texas to another state. After living there a few years we ended up taking a trip with some close friends of my parents and their kids. Now, since moving, my dad had gotten a new license in the new state. As we all sat down and waited for the plane to take off, one of the attendants came over the intercom. "Will Raul come to the front of the aircraft?" I can't remember the problem, but I wasn't paying attention because I didn't know a Raul until my father stood up and headed for the front of the plane. I sat there stunned, trying to process why my father was suddenly known as Raul. As it turns out, in Texas you can have your nickname on your license, and the English version of Raul was Roy. So for my father's entire life he had Roy put on his license. When we moved, he had to have it changed back to Raul. I buy beer from a family-owned convenience store almost daily. The guy that works behind the counter says my name every time I walk in, and I call him man. It's been at least 4 years at this point. I'm in too deep to ask now. Just check your receipt lol. Unfortunately, they still use an old analog cash register so that won't work. Nice try, Mom. I lived next door to an elderly woman for about 10 years. Her name was Nellie and she was always very sweet. Her daughter came over one day and told me Willie died. I told her I didn't know a Willie but I was very sorry for her loss. She looked at me like I was nuts and said I'd lived next door to her mom for 10 years. Turns out I misheard her, and she had bad hearing. We both heard what we expected to hear. Going on 8 years now I think. It was a guy from uni. He probably told me his name when we were drunk but I forgot and haven't asked him since. We see each other once a month or something like that. 4 years. I've been calling this dude. I went to school with Wesley for 4 years. At the last day of school after 4 years, he came up to me and said, "BTW, my name is Nick. How did you mix up Nick Locano for Wesley Crusher?" 2005 to this day, the waitress in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, one of the best long-running tropes in any show. The fact that even Charlie, who's psychotically obsessed with her, doesn't know her name is so funny. 2 months maybe. A girl who was a mutual acquaintance would regularly call me and talk a lot. I really didn't get her name when she introduced. Didn't ask until while sitting in break someone shouted her name from across the class. I don't remember her name anymore. Would? So, funny story. I met a girl and really hit it off with her, but she never told me her name. We texted a ton, made plans to go on a date, and I was extremely excited. She delved really deep into her life story and experiences, but still, no name. I knew her first pet's name, the street she grew up on, and basically every other security question. I could tell you the age that she decided what her career path would be, or her favorite ice cream flavor. It was so jarring. It was some real Seinfeldian poop. I'm telling you. I deliberated on how to find out her name, asking friends and loved ones advice on this. On a side note, my friends give poop advice it turns out. My cousin finally said to me, "Ask her, you idiot." And so I did. She ghosted me. I guess it wasn't meant to be. Obviously the best trick is taking her to Starbucks. I still have to ask my brother-in-law's name. So 2 years I guess. I love that you keep asking. Power move. Always continue asking. Let them know they're so insignificant that their mere name doesn't even deserve to reside inside that powerhouse of a brain of yours. Make them feel like the punes they are. I was confused about my grandmother's name until I was 17. I didn't know my dad's name till I was 17. So I think you good. All my life, I don't know the names of some of my cousins. 2 years. When I was in college I smoked and played hacky sack with a guy from another program every day. 5 days a week I would talk to him at least once or twice daily, and we would spend 20 minutes or so together. I called him buddy and he called me man. Hey buddy, hey man, bahahahaha. Almost a year after the 1 month mark, it just became too awkward to ask for the name. Face with tears of joy. Face with tears of joy. And the worst part was her being in my tight-knit group of friends, but I didn't even know what letter her name started with. Hey, I just realized I don't have your phone number. Can you text me with your name when you get a chance? This is some thinking right there. When I was like 13, I had my first BF who was a neighbor. He egregiously pronounced my name wrong the first time I met him, and so did his family as a result. And for some reason I didn't want to correct him. We dated for a year and I never said anything. About 10 years and counting. The newsagents I buy our newspaper from each morning know my name because it's on the vouchers I use. I know one of their staff's names and am too embarrassed to ask anyone else. I'm also a social dancer, or was before lockdown, and don't know the names of most of the women I dance with. I spent 18 months at my current job with a guy calling me Dave. One day he called me over and some other guys looked at him like he was nuts. When he found out my real name he was upset and spent the next 6 months apologizing. Here's the thing. I didn't mind because I'm useless at remembering names. It's 2 years since he stopped apologizing. But he wears his ID badge back to front, and to this day I'm not entirely sure what he's called. My father had a friend nicknamed Cookie that he met during the 68 feet events. My sister asked him what was her real name. He told us he has no idea. Over a decade, me and my brother had a nanny from when I was born until I was about 12. She is like my second mom. Her name is Edna, except it actually isn't. It is Amelia. And it took me years to find out. Apparently when she introduced herself to her previous employers, they misheard Edna for Amelia, and she just rolled with it. So when they recommended her to my parents, she was called Edna. So everyone in the family called her Edna, and she was fine with it. I don't remember ever calling her Amelia. Even when I found out, she told me I could keep with Edna cause that was just what we were used to and she was fine with this name. So both my crush and I were interested in each other, but I don't remember names for some reason, so I pulled a sneaky asked for her number, then asked how her name was spelled. One of my biggest brain moments. UHHPM. I once worked with a man for 3 years and never got to know his name. Best friend I ever had. We still never talk sometimes. Since before conception, I have yet to learn my grandma and great-grandma's names. They're both just called grandma. Similar issue. For about 8 years, my grandmother and great-grandmother were called Ma and Granny respectively, but my grandfather and great-grandfather, Grandpa Jim and Grandpa George, I was able to get away with it because they were usually in separate areas. Go to the garden and get Grandpa George. Grandpa Jim needs you in his office. Grandpa George is in the hen house. Grandpa Jim is going to teach you to ride a mower. Until I was 8, and both were in the living room and I was asked to bring Grandpa Jim some iced tea. I just stood there in doorway until I just said Grandpa Jim, and Jim waved at me. Never forgot after that. At my work is an identical twin. After 8 years I still don't know who I'm talking to. I was friends with this guy on Xbox. His username was Gooseyanthalus. I met him playing Black Ops 3 around 2015. We played so much but I always called him Goose. It wasn't until last year when we played with his IRL friends and they said, "So how's it going, Matt?" My mind was blown. Bro, you actually watched the whole video. I'd give you a high five if I was a human. Make sure to click the like button and subscribe for more great content. See you next time.